Hey, how's it going, everyone? So, thought I would try something a little different here. Still working on those other projects, and I'll be making more videos about that. But in the meantime, I thought it would be pretty fun to do some reaction stuff too. So, I was watching something interesting. I have some thoughts on, and yeah, that's kind of the point of Evergreen Insights here. It's mostly marketing and business related, but pretty much anything um, that I might have a little insight on or just thoughts. But yeah, I was watching this Bryan Johnson versus 20 video here, 20 Skeptics. I think he's super interesting. Bryan Johnson, he's a hard one to get a read on, and I'm pretty good at reading people, but I think there's some interesting points made. I'm about 16 minutes in, so let's watch the most like interesting part of this whole thing, which is
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it just by thinking
which
about
is
Meet Base 44.
Rich and poor, whatever nation, it is the single thing that a
when
48-year-old
Chelsea comes up. So
I should be living my life, and I think
I'll start it from the start.
Feel about sovereignty and personal choice. Appreciate you.
So just to finish up this guy's question first, I'll comment on this.
How would you?
Yeah, what I'm trying to do is I used to eat fast food, and I did it because it was just a thing we did in our culture, and fast food is really bad for you. And then I learned that these companies use the very best science to actually make you addicted. And so what I'm arguing is it's not for a few rich people. This is society is systematically killing itself.
Okay.
And I think that's a bad thing for everybody.
Society is systematically killing itself, and that's a bad thing for everyone. What do you feel about sovereignty and personal choice? Appreciate
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
So that's kind of a shame that they voted that guy out right at that question. I thought that was a good question. I think Brian has some really good points here as well. Just the fact that, you know, um, he's basically arguing that the economic system in the world, but especially in America, is pointed directly at profit over everything. And that pursuit has manifested in the pursuit of death kind of all around. So, let's say companies, I was just looking at, I care about cars, as some of you are coming to know. And I think it's interesting because when you look at the different vehicles that are coming out, like the Corvette ZR1, really cool car, 1,000 horsepower, rear wheel drive only. And in that sense, it's kind of silly, like it really honestly is. It's not probably the safest car. It's really fast. It's really cool. Most people realistically can't handle that. And there's the argument to be made of, should that car even be allowed on the roads, on public roads? Obviously, it was built for the track. It shines the best on tracks. And it's arguable that perhaps that vehicle shouldn't be allowed, because it's a risk to the person driving it, in almost all situations, even if you are a professional driver, because when you're dealing with that high level of horsepower on public roads, you're not dealing with a closed loop environment like a track. And I think that's something a lot of auto manufacturers and car enthusiasts have lost sight of. Tracks are treated, prepped. They're known variables that you can apply your skill to, and you can say, hey, this turn coming up there, I know I have this much traction, I know I can take it this quick, and you can really push a car like that to its limit and get crazy good track times and all of that. Now, when you do that on public roads, you have potholes, you have debris, somebody might have dropped some trash in the road, there might be some random gravel that fell off a truck or sand or whatever. There could be ice, black ice. There can be all kinds of road hazards, as well as maybe somebody's dog runs out into the road, maybe somebody's kid. All kinds of things that happen that are not just merely about your skill at that point. Now you're dealing with unknown variables that you just do not have much control over. So not to say I'm against any fast car on the road, but I do think that's an example of Bryan Johnson's point here, where it's like, are companies really considering all of that? And the answer is, of course, they aren't. They're building the Demon 170, they're building ZR1s and all these 1,000+ horsepower cars for public roads just because people love the numbers. People love to go quick, and so I think he has a very solid point there. Now, the other guy's point to him was, what about sovereignty? What about people's right to choose to have that crazy Corvette or eat McDonald's or do inherently risky things because they want to? And that is also a good rebuttal to it. Not going to necessarily say my opinion on it. I think for the most part, like, in my personal opinion, I think for the most part, people should be allowed to choose. But I do think that as a society, the systems and the engines that kind of push things forward need to have guardrails to push us forward in the direction that the majority should be going. And I think that whenever we have an engine that is pushing the bulk of society in a direction that is not beneficial or that is just harmful, that is a bad thing. That's not to say any system or any human system should be so constrictive that if somebody chooses to go in that harmful direction against the larger society's mandate, if you will, that we shouldn't allow that freedom, because I do think people should have individual freedom. So that's my personal thought. But yeah, I would have wanted to hear Bryan's thought on that. But now we get Chelsea instead. So let's continue watching. And just so you guys know, I've watched about 60 minutes of this. So this last 3 minutes I have seen, and everything before it, but I haven't seen anything else. And I don't know how much of this I'll record, but we'll see.
Hi, Bryan. My name is Chelsea Godds, and I sit across from
Chelsea
you today. I'm going to
Godds.
say the thing that a lot of people in this circle are thinking. It's easy when you're rich to care about not dying. Most people spend all day, every day, also caring about not dying because they're living paycheck to paycheck. 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Being poor is the story of humanity across the whole globe. I think listening to a man who doesn't know what it's like, how he's going to make rent next month, that to some of us, it feels pretty strange to hear you tell us that we're not focused on being alive. I think every person here is struggling to be alive every single day. I think most people in this country are struggling to be alive every single day. And when they smoke a cigarette, it's not about
This is my
whether they're gonna
flag.
die. It's about enjoying that moment. I'm talking to a man who publicly has said that you eat pureed food every day. And you're telling me, a normal human being who is like everyone else, struggling financially and whatnot, how I should be living my life. And I think there's something that's really disconnected about that. I also think that it's really false of you to claim that people are focusing their life on dying, when really all of us are focusing on surviving. That's why we're here. Every one of us is here today because we're surviving. We don't go to McDonald's and think, oh, this is killing me. We go to McDonald's because we don't have enough time in the day to make dinner, because we can't afford to go to the grocery store and buy a $20 steak, because we can't shop at Erewhon and get $40 of strawberries, you know? So I think a lot of us are here wondering, what does you, a person who's rich, who doesn't know what struggle is like, and who also talks about the fact that you use your own son's blood, have to add to us as humanity?
Yeah. Hi, Chelsea.
Hey.
Yeah, I grew up.
Okay. First, I do want to acknowledge that I think it's absolutely disgusting that he injects his son's blood, and that is, from what I've seen, by far my biggest problem with Bryan Johnson. I think it's possible that he's exactly as he presents, just like a good actor that really cares about longevity and optimization and all these things. But I do think it's disgusting that he uses his son's blood, and he shouldn't be doing that. That's my opinion. Now, aside from that, I think everything else she said is, everything else and including that comment was just a misplaced, hate-filled victimization rant, if we're being honest. Like, even that comment, it didn't have anything to do with this particular question, which, his premise here is ending death should be humanity's number one objective. And she's talking about, I think it's disgusting you use your son's blood. I think so too. But you're just ranting at that point. You're not bringing anything of value. You're not asking any kind of valuable question. She clearly just has this very vicious victim mentality and hate towards rich people, because she's suffering. And I do understand the suffering, but I don't think it's ever justified to kind of outsource that vitriol and hate on somebody else, and project it to somebody like Bryan. And you don't know his story. She didn't know his story. None of us really do. But from what I've seen and what he's about to say is like he actually did grow up really poor. And that's honestly the case for a lot of very successful entrepreneurs, like self-made entrepreneurs, because poverty and struggle is usually what drives you to build businesses. And so that's relevant to this channel too. It's Damon Johnson writes about it, which is a bald shark from Shark Tank, a black guy. He writes about it in The Power of Broke, which is essentially kind of utilizing that power to like really push you forward to create and build and just accomplish things. Whereas she vents all of that power out in frustration and just lashing out at the world and hating everyone who has more than her or is in a better situation, from what it sounds like. So it's not a good mentality, and it certainly isn't going to help her live longer. And I think he made some interesting points, so let's hear what he has to say about it.
With four other siblings, single mom. My mother made my clothes because we didn't have enough money for her to buy clothes for me. I went to school and I got made fun of because my clothes didn't fit and they were awkward. I didn't have money my entire life. I became an entrepreneur. I struggled for 14 years with no money whatsoever. So I understand what it feels like to have no money. I didn't know what it feels like to be poor. So I've been through that. I also was chronically depressed for 10 years. I wanted to commit suicide desperately. I really would have committed suicide had it not been for my 3 kids. I felt like I had a responsibility to them. So I understand struggle. I understand pain. I was, 50 pounds overweight. I was in a terrible shape. And so I understand what it's like to be that way. My argument is not to criticize you or anyone else. What I'm arguing is that companies have built their products to make you addicted and to make you ill. That's the core thing I'm trying to say, is that the most powerful economic engine in all of history, the American economic engine, has pointed itself at creating addictive foods and phones and social media and porn and junk food.
Do you not think that you're addicted to trying to stay alive? Do you not think that that's an addiction?
So I think he makes a really good point, and she's rebuttaling.
I think not doing fat injections in your face, constantly doing plastic surgery. Do you not see that as an addiction yourself?
No, I view it as a pursuit, and we're trying to figure out.
So if I change the name of my addictions to a pursuit, then maybe you'll think that it's socially acceptable?
See, and there's the biggest disconnect right there. I think that she is very blinded by anger, honestly. She's completely missing his point. His point isn't judgment or commentary on the fact that somebody might be addicted to XYZ, smoking cigarettes, McDonald's, whatever. She is so enraged at, frankly, it seems like everything, but especially him, on account of him being rich. And then she's also very defensive. She doesn't clearly want to give up addictions. And so instead she's focusing on, is it socially acceptable? Like, I feel like she thinks he is a threat because, one, he is potentially trying to change a paradigm that she agrees with on some level, clearly. And then two, I feel like she feels like he's a threat because he is changing the social conversation around certain things, such as eating McDonald's. And, if she has no desire to give up eating McDonald's, she's like, well, if you keep pursuing this, it may become socially unacceptable for me to, or socially less acceptable for me to eat McDonald's, be fat, smoke cigarettes, all of the addictions, drink a bunch, whatever her thing is. And I think that's her contention here. Although she doesn't word it like that, she just instead attacks. And, she did actually say, though, what I believe was on her mind, that you think you're like superior, like, I feel like that's a big difference between somebody who's suffering from addiction and somebody who's bought into addiction. So I really think that she is bought into her addiction, and it shows.
I think that we share something in common, that neither one of us wants to die in this moment.
I mean, not today, but sometime, hopefully. Hopefully.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people would change their opinion and want to exist if the conditions of society were not so brutal. It's not fair for...
What have you done to change those brutal conditions in society?
This is so funny. I do agree with him that people would probably want to exist more if society didn't suck so much. I don't necessarily agree with his overall don't die thing, in the way that he's trying to go about it. But I think the pursuit of health and a better life is a noble pursuit. Now she's talking about what has he done, which is pretty ironic because clearly he is doing a decent amount of work, at least far, far, far more than the average person, and more than most even celebrities or people with money and some amount of influence. I would say that he's definitely directing it in full force at pushing the bar and the line for medical therapies and understanding of how to actually achieve longevity and how to actually achieve health. He's using his full money and power to kind of push that line. And he's also, especially recently, going pretty heavily at fast food chains, at bringing education on why exactly even certain foods like Taco Bell are actually very bad for you, which has been kind of eye-opening even for me. Like I kind of knew just intrinsically, like, yeah, this probably isn't the best, but you see the lettuce, tomato, cheese, sour cream, a little bit of ground beef on a pretty thin tortilla wrap, and you're like, it's probably not that bad. Like, got some good macros in there, some good protein. But the way he breaks it down, and he actually exposes all the different chemicals they use, all the different additives, like it's really fascinating, shocking stuff. Even the fact that he brought out something I didn't know, which is in the EU, Taco Bell was fined heavily because it was found that they use horse meat, or at least 10% of horse DNA was found in their ground beef over there. So that's shocking, and that's pretty disgusting, and it makes you wonder what's over here, because the FDA doesn't seem to care about Americans nearly as much as the European Union. So yeah, it just makes you wonder what goes on. But anyway, he's definitely done a lot. Her point is pretty whack.
Your person who has literally hundreds of millions of dollars, and you spend $2 million every year trying to look younger. And honestly, you look your age. Like, that's the
I do
reality.
agree.
And I'm not even
He
the
looks
person
his
who
age.
said that. So, what are you doing to make humanity better, really, other than pursuing your own vanity?
Yeah, well, I share everything I learn from all the scientific evidence with everybody for free.
But it's scientific evidence from your own body, right? So the study isn't terribly useful to the general population because a black woman isn't going to have the same biometrics as a 48-year-old white man. So, I mean, in some ways, it's kind of a selfish pursuit that you're trying to make it seem like it's altruistic. I feel like that's the disingenuous part of this conversation, is that you're coming at it from an argument of altruism, but I see it, and I think a lot of people in this room today see it as selfishness and greed to try and hold on to life as much as you can. So much so that you bragged about using your teenage son's blood, which I have to tell you, history is not going to be kind about that. Nobody thinks about that woman in the Turkish royalty who bathed in handmaiden's blood and has a positive feeling about that. I don't think anyone is going to read about you in the future and be like, oh, wasn't that great? Wasn't that awesome that Bryan Johnson used his own teenage son's blood to make himself younger? No one's going to feel that way.
So, two things. One is the evidence is based upon population level evidence. It's not on Bryan Johnson, it's not 48-year-old males, it's population level evidence where you can make conclusions like 7 to 8 hours a night of sleep is good for.
And that's something that rich people get to do and poor people don't get to do.
Just on and on with the victimization. You know, I guess only rich people get to sleep too, apparently. It's just sad. Like it's sad to see somebody feel so victimized to the point where they think that they completely lack agency and autonomy. You know, she thinks that, oh, well, because I don't have money, not only can I not improve my situation, I can't even make little changes. Like, I'm just a slave to everything. You know, she has to go to McDonald's. She has to smoke the cigarette. She has to drink. She has to sleep less than 8 hours. She can't ever organize her schedule or organize her day or find a different job or create something or, you know, improve her situation or learn new skills or whatever she needs to do to actually achieve anything. You know, she's just a complete, in her mind, it seems like she's a complete victim of circumstance, and that's a sad place to be. So, and she's angry and bitter on top of it. Which, if you have that mindset, how could you not be angry and bitter? So that part I do understand, but I think that's the ultimate flaw that she needs to unpack, and she probably needs a lot of therapy, to be honest. She probably needs a lot of therapy. And, you know, I find it funny, Kendrick Lamar said something where he was like, what did he say? It's in one of his songs where he was like, being rich don't make you right, or like it doesn't make you kind of good, and being poor doesn't make you like righteous, something like that. And I completely agree. Obviously, just because you have money, I think there's a huge problem with the idolization and worship of people that have money or have had some kind of success, where they're often looked at as bastions, or they're often villainized by people like her. I think they're just regular people with money. And then I think that just because you're poor, like this person is, doesn't necessarily mean that she's more virtuous or altruistic or righteous or anything like that. Like, you could just be poor because you're lazy, or you could be poor because maybe your circumstances are bad and you did get dealt a bad hand where it makes it really hard. You didn't grow up in the best area. You didn't have many opportunities. Maybe you're dealing with mental health, or you're dealing with other kind of infirmities and elements that might hinder you significantly. So I understand that. I'm not saying that poor people are automatically, you know, to blame for their situation. Even me, I've had many times where I haven't been in the best situation, been unable to pay bills, whatnot. But that's why you work, you know, that's why you focus and do what you can. And I feel like having somebody that just thinks that there's absolutely nothing they can do to improve their situation is a terrible place to be for them. So that's what I see here, and yeah, it's pretty sad. And then obviously she's completely discounting his legitimate point that he is doing most of his studies on the societal level. So humans in general benefit from 8 hours of sleep. Humans in general might benefit from some of the other protocols and research that he's done, that, it isn't necessarily always specific to him, and almost probably in general is not specific to him. So, but I think this is an interesting kind of case study, if you will, because it shows how much rage just blinds people. It's wild. But let's finish this.
You think rich people are working overnight shifts? They're not.
Yeah, you need to give me a little space to respond.
Sure, of course.
Okay, so you did the other thing you were saying about my son's blood. So the reason that came about is my father is now in his early 70s. He has cognitive decline. He called me one day and he said, Bryan, I'm suffering that I can't now complete basic work projects. I'm losing my mind and I'm terrified. I said, Dad, my team and I are doing research on cognitive decline. There's a new therapy of exchanging plasma. If it would be helpful to you, I'd be happy to do this. So I did the plasma exchange for my dad because he's losing his mind. Now, my son said, hey, Bryan, or Dad, if you're doing this, I'm happy to do it too. We'll make it a tri-generational thing. It wasn't me and my son. It was me doing it for my father. The press, of course, makes headlines of that, and they make you believe that I'm a nefarious actor. That's not the case.
But it's not really just the press doing that, because you walked into this room and that was one of the very first things you said about yourself. You wore it like a badge of honor, and I think that you do that because it's controversial. To sit there and say that that label is given to you by the press is a little bit disingenuous.
I agree.
You gave that label to yourself.
I definitely
You did it
agree.
to be shocking. You did it to make headlines yourself. So to put that onto the press, I actually think is really disingenuous.
That's fair. That's the one good thing Chelsea said. Way to go, Chelsea. You redeemed it. Not really, but you tried. You did. You got in a little something at the end. So let's see how long this video is going. Okay. I'll do it for another. I'll see what this next person has to say.
Hi.
Brianna,
Hi, Brianna. Nice to meet you.
nice to meet you, Brian. So
Better energy.
that you said, I just would like to touch on what the first thing is. Your focus about the industry, focusing on death. I do agree with a previous debater that the focus on living is also taken away from any true living. As a human, I value the experiences I have with my friends, with my partners, even the experiences of lessons learned in life, which sometimes do include fast food, sometimes do include those things that you were doing to your body and damaged yourself. However, looking back, I can't see where it is that you yourself have found this fixation that death is the total destruction. We as humans have always kind of chose destruction, and then we value life through that. And I wonder what your position is when I bring these points to you.
I think when death is inevitable.
All right. Before he responds, and this is the part I haven't seen, that was wild. That was a wild kind of take. I disagree. I don't think humans have always valued death and destruction. And I don't think we find purpose in it. I think that there's a lot of bad actors and there's a lot of misaligned incentives that kind of push people in that direction and push society in general in that direction. For example, you have one overly powerful person or a king and they want more land. And just based on that one person's ambition, he can, if he has the sufficient power, like set a whole country towards warfare, towards strengthening themselves militarily so they can go and take that land from somebody else. And this isn't humans at large valuing it. This is the misaligned incentives often pushed down from the top. And I feel like the coping mechanism, or the fact that humans are so adaptable and so poetic in a sense, we are able to find the silver lining even in that destruction. We're able to find, for some people, purpose, or, you know, we're able to use that, like that one saying, which is memori, it's memento mori, something like that. I'll put it on the screen, but yeah. So even like that, which is basically a reminder that, like, hey, death could be around the corner. So live to the fullest. But I don't think that needs to be the only incentive, nor do I think it's the better incentive to live. So there's two types of major motivation. There's like the fear-based motivation, scarcity-based, where something behind you is pushing you and you're running away from it as fast as you can because you don't want that thing to catch you. And then there is the desire-based motivation, where it's like that thing is in front of you and you really want to get to it. And that could be anything. That could be like, I really want this nice car. I really want to have a beautiful family, or I really want to get home to my children and, you know, just be with them, hang out, play with them, all kinds of things. These are the things that are pulling you. And I feel like in life, it's almost always stronger and better to have that pulling than to like be pushed from behind by this fear. You're never going to live to the fullest, and you're operating on adrenaline, you're operating in scarcity, you're operating in anxiety. And yeah, it's never, even if you achieve in that state, you're never going to be satisfied. Your nervous system is going to be fried, versus when you are being pulled from things further out that you want to achieve, that you want to accomplish, that you want to do, it can be very satisfying. Like, hey, I felt this call to do something great and I did it. And then you feel very satisfied, versus, hey, I felt extreme poverty and I just didn't want to starve to death. So I worked my butt off and now I have money. And that person is generally still miserable. You know, they're even largely resentful of the thing that they got because they felt coerced into getting it. You know, and that's a very real thing. There's highly successful people, lawyers, doctors, all kinds of people that are highly successful, and they feel coerced into having done that career. They felt like, I was going to be a failure. I was going to be the black sheep of the family. I was living in poverty. I didn't have a choice. I had to bust my butt in school, work 2 jobs to get through school, go to law school, make it work 90 hours at this law firm to make partner, and now I have everything I ever wanted. And they're miserable because they were coerced into that whole life. They didn't choose it. They didn't necessarily want to do it out of, they might have even wanted to do it, but they didn't move out of the chase, you know, the desire to achieve, the desire to accomplish. They didn't move. It's like that that triangle of self-fulfillment, self-actualization. Like, they never hit self-actualization. They were operating in the lower level, even though they achieved very high things in terms of society's, you know, standards. They were always operating in that scarcity survival mode. Even after their finances exceeded it, their mentality was still down there. And that can be a very hard thing to break. And there's a good video from this guy who was a neurosurgeon, spine surgeon. And he talks about leaving his career. And that's the only time that he actually found, you know, that self-actualization. And it can be very interesting. He said a lot of people feel trapped, and that's a very real thing. And that's also why a lot of dentists and a lot of different professionals do commit suicide, even though they have tons of money and, you know, career success. But I digress. I just think that her point was a little off. But let's hear what Bryan has to say.
any true living. As a human, I value the experiences I have with my friends, with my partners, even the experiences of lessons learned in life, which sometimes do include fast food, sometimes do include those things that you were doing to your body and damaged yourself. However, looking back, I can't see.
Real quick, I did want to touch on that. I think that's really dumb too. Like, I do think the reality is, unfortunately, a lot of people, myself included at times, can be very stubborn, and we have to learn from firsthand experience. But the wise thing to do and wisdom is to be able to learn without having experienced it. So if I watch a video or see somebody touch a hot stove and burn themselves, wisdom is that I don't have to go and burn myself as well to learn that lesson to not touch a hot stove. And I think that, unfortunately, a lot of the times we need to actually experience the consequences to learn, just because we lack wisdom or we lack the humility and the wherewithal to learn from other people. But you can learn from other people. You can learn from their mistakes, and you can avoid repeating those same mistakes. And I think that's why it's important to talk to people, why it's important to grow your brain, to gather knowledge, and to not necessarily have to run into the same pitfall that they ran into. In fact, that's the basis of human advancement. That's why we are so much more technologically advanced than we were 200-300 years ago, because we saw their mistakes, we saw what they did right, and we took what they did right and we left what they did wrong. And continuously doing that, okay, somebody comes out with a steam engine, we see what they did right and we see where it needs improvement. They didn't remake the steam engine every single time, because then we would still have the same steam engine. No, they iterate, improve, adapt. And that should be what you do in your personal life too. We don't just need to do that on the societal level. So you can say, hey, I saw where this person did something great. I saw where they did something that screwed up. I'm going to avoid that same mess up, and I'm going to take what they did right and I'm going to run with it. And you keep doing that. And that's why it's important to study people, to read books, to just observe life around you, to talk to your elders, talk to those older than you, and see what you can take from their experiences without having to always repeat it. So, yep.
Where it is that you yourself have found this fixation that death is the total destruction. We as humans have always kind of chose destruction, and then we value life through that. And I wonder what your position is when I bring these points to you.
I think when death is inevitable, people YOLO their way to death. I might as well then do the following debaucherous things, because it makes me feel something. And that's been something we've done. We've basically made these debaucherous acts of death virtues, where it's seen as a positive thing in someone's life. And so an accusation I get all the time is like, Bryan, you're not living. And why am I not living? Because I'm not staying up late, and I'm not drinking alcohol, and I'm not smoking, I'm not eating fast food. And they're like, you're not living. You're missing out on life. Right. And I try to explain that that's really a misconception, that we all know once you eat a fast food meal, you feel terrible. No one's winning in doing that. And so I'm saying that right now, this is a special moment. If we weren't giving birth to superintelligence, if that wasn't some kind of things happening in the moment, I'd say sure, do your thing, whatever. This moment is special. And when we're bringing that intelligence into the world, when we value death, we're sending the wrong signal to the species. We treat planet Earth the same way we treat our bodies. So we are a species that has embraced and seeks after death, and it ruins our health, our individual health, our societal health. For example, you look at the current number of people on antidepressants or anti-anxiety meds. Right. You look at people who are lonely, the suicide rates. We are a sick society. And that to me is what people are trying to say, let's celebrate that. That's life. And I'm saying that is not life. This is not a good situation. Everyone's in pain and suffering. So let's address that.
So I absolutely agree with you, actually. However, what I do see, again, is that through these things of comfort, as you kind of called them, right? We do that because we're still living in between those times. Those bursts of moments that we have with people, we've chosen to drink. Yes. Do I agree that that's good? no. And I'm like, don't do it. You don't feel good the next day. But the connection is how we joke about that, how we all kind of iron sharpens iron, and we learn from that. We pass those lessons on.
I think she has a decent point. She's kind of making the point that I was making, except for the fact that she doesn't recognize the fact that it's coping. And that's what I was saying earlier. Like, the death and the destruction and the debauchery is what is there. Often, whether people like it or not, often whether people pursue it or not. Bryan makes a good point where, because a lot of us recognize it's there anyways, some people choose to lean into it, to just embrace it, to, YOLO their way to death, because they realize, hey, I don't have much choice whether I live or die. And that's kind of back to the Chelsea thing, where it's just a low autonomy, either in reality or mindset. Sometimes it's both. Sometimes you have the low autonomy mindset, which I feel like Chelsea definitely had. And then sometimes you are also in a genuinely low autonomy situation where, like, for example, if you're a man of fighting age in Ukraine, you're probably getting drafted, especially if you don't have the money and connections to avoid that. So for somebody like that, I understand why they would drink. It's like, hey, I'm going to be sent to war. I might get blown up. I might die. Like, I have very, very little control over that situation. So, hey, might as well just, lean into it. Like, why would anyone plant a garden if they never thought they could see it bloom, if they never thought they could eat that fruit? So I get that standpoint of it. But at the same time, we don't actually know what's going to happen, and we don't actually know where life ends up. And I think from a operating philosophy, it's definitely more impactful and more useful to you and to everyone to just do the best they can and leave the rest to God.
And we continue to grow as a society. One thing that you mentioned was nature. I love that because I really struggled through your conversation earlier with the prior debater about life and the philosophical points of it. Polarity is a science that we adhere to. There has to be polarity in this process. I think it was described more as like a seasonal, right? However, for me, it's the polarity. Without death, you don't know life. And if
I
we
disagree.
only have life continuing, that process, such as you mentioned, the earth, would be interrupted. I think that is something that is not worth the unmeasurable time that we would need to even determine whether that's something that we can do. I also feel that
Thank you. My next claim is that we may be the first generation who won't die.
Want to strengthen your math skills? Try Brilliant. It's an effective and fun way to learn, built for the way your mind actually...
All right, so I think I'm going to wrap it up here. You guys can go watch the rest of the video on Jubilee. And yeah, that was just some of my thoughts on the conversation that was being had. I would like to add to this that I think ultimately the only way to truly pursue everlasting life is through Jesus Christ. You have to know God, you have to know his son, and you have to be willing to follow him and have faith in that. And it's ironic because a lot of people like Bryan Johnson and many, many more before him throughout human history have done this thing where we try to achieve what has already been freely given. And really it just takes the faith and the willingness to accept the free gift. So I hope everyone keeps that in mind. And just know that there is life after death. It's not what Christianity, mainstream Christianity, commonly says. If we actually read the Bible, it talks about a resurrection, which Jesus has proved the power of through his own resurrection, but also through the resurrection of Lazarus. And yeah, it says the meek shall inherit the earth. So that's some hope for you guys. And I hope everyone here pursues that and actually attains to true everlasting life, and doesn't get too caught up in trying to seek it through our own means, because I do believe that is a foolish pursuit that ultimately will not pan out. That's not to say that everything that somebody like Bryan Johnson does is foolish. I think that he is doing a lot of good things that will probably benefit him and also others, in the meantime. So I think that's cool. All right. See ya.